This is the Comedy Room where we discuss comedy and the people behind it. Today's episode sees us looking at the year 2001, and our comedy legend this month is Nicholas Lyndhurst.
Hello all, and welcome to the podcast once again. Before we get on with the subject in hand, let's tell you what else happened in the year 2001. On the TV, we saw Jack D win the first ever Celebrity Big Brother. We said goodbye to Richard and Judy as they hosted their final this morning. It was also the year where Charles Ingram infamously won Who Wants to Be a Millionaire jackpot, and 21 million of us watched the return of Only Fools and Horses as the first of 3 episodes aired. As far as films go, it seems there's a lot of kids' films here with Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, Shrek and Monsters, Inc. making the top 3. Rush Hour 2 and The Mummy Return were 4 and 5 on the global box office hits. And as for music, we weren't spoiled because we had Atomic Kitten with Whole Again, Shaggy It Wasn't Me, Kylie with I Can't Get You Out of My Head, Hey Baby by DJ Otzi, and the S Club 7 with Don't Stop Moving were the top 5 selling singles of 2001. In sport, we had Ronnie O'Sullivan win his first ever World Snooker Championship.
Has to be said, on the subject of the top 5 singles of that year, what utter shite.
As far as our pop songs go, Whole Again and Kylie's I Can't Get You Out of My Head, okay. The rest, I wouldn't look at if someone gave them to me for free.
Unfortunately, I was working in retail at that kind of time, so I had those songs proverbially rammed down my throat. But yeah, that was not the greatest year for music. And if anyone's interested, as an aside about the whole Charles Ingram thing, there was a really good ITV drama called Quiz. It kind of tells the story of the whole sort of event and sort of how they came to find out about what was going on. So the comedies that we got in 2001. There's some great and some not so great, shall we say. So there was The Office, which was the first time we really sort of got a glimpse of Ricky Gervais and what he does. And that was a bit of a favourite of yours, wasn't it?
I'd probably say that's my favourite sitcom of all time. I'll probably rewatch all 14 episodes at least once, twice a year, and annoy the wife because I can just repeat it verbatim. I can sort of quote it before they even say it, and she's like, "I want to watch this. I want to watch this. Shut up." So yeah, I'm probably more annoying than David Brent when The Office is on.
It was absolutely brilliant. And the best thing about it was it really sort of encapsulated its time, because at that sort of time, there was a real sort of trend on British TV for sort of fly-on-the-wall documentaries. So it would literally be any kind of excuse to follow people around doing quite mundane things and really sort of hyper-exaggerating it. And there's only 2 shows that have ever sort of really parodied it well, this being the first, and a lesser well-known show from a few years ago called Borderline did the same sort of thing. But the best thing about The Office is really just sort of everyone else's reactions to Brent and just sort of everything he does, and then everyone else was kind of like just kind of look at each other awkwardly as he makes a fool of himself, numerous times over. Because we've seen sort of similar characters in the likes of Gordon Brittus and Alan Partridge, but never sort of to this sort of extreme where everyone's sort of visibly sort of what is he doing?
The thing about watching it, I watched the first ever episode because I was working in an office, as I still do, and I saw a clip of it, and I thought, this is interesting. This is there's a couple of characters there that I work with, and I watched the first episode, and it wasn't until the credits started rolling, and then you saw actual actors against the names that I realised it was an actual show, and it wasn't real life. That's how I first started watching it. I thought it was a real life documentary.
And it was really interesting because we hadn't seen a lot of these people before. So obviously you've got Ricky Gervais, and then also Martin Freeman, who I'm a huge fan of. We'd never really seen him in anything before. And then obviously we've seen him in so much since. But it's just a whole sort of, everything about it was very sort of subtle, the humor as well. And it wasn't the sort of thing where you'd sit down and there'd be this sort of laughter track and sort of canned laughter coming in. It would be a case of you yourself sort of finding out for yourself what was funny, but from behind the cushion, as Brent embarrassed himself over and over again.
Yeah.
And it really sort of paved the way for sort of cringe comedy to come to the fore. So we ended up with things like, so the American series went absolutely stratospheric, and also things like Curb Your Enthusiasm. So the whole point of having a central character who does something, but rather than sort of, he's fallen over, oh, isn't it funny? It's a case of, no, he didn't do that, did he? He didn't just embarrass himself in that way. And rather than sort of laughing at something sort of slapstick that somebody's done, or just like a one-liner or something, you're laughing at their reaction to a situation and everyone else's reaction to them and sort of cringing for them. And it really sort of brought sort of cringe comedy to the fore, which is certainly no bad thing. Kind of bringing a new sort of genre of comedy to the front for us all to enjoy.
Ricky Gervais, he's been dubbed sort of a one-trick pony throughout his career, but that's not a bad trick to have, though, is it?
That's he's definitely kind of brought a sort of, it's sort of subtle humor, isn't it?
Yes.
Rather than just kind of like telling you a joke, he'll sort of turn the spotlight onto you. And it's just kind of like, I'm going to do something. How are you going to react to it?
That's exactly right. Yeah. He makes you go looking for the punchline.
That's the thing. It's kind of like, rather than, here's the punchline, here's everything done for you, everything sort of unfolds in front of you. And it's a very unusual sense of humor, but he has his critics, but he has his very fanatical fans as well.
And I think to sort of to quote him, not word for word, but he says, "People don't like me, but I don't care. I'm rich." And I just thought, that's one way of looking at it.
That's the thing, because you find a lot of comedians are either very, very sort of publicity shy,
yes,
or they're kind of upfront and they're like, I'm not going to starve, am I? And it's interesting when you get that kind of difference in dynamic of somebody who's going to be completely upfront and say, yeah, I'm wealthy.
Yeah, I think because Gervais's characters are sort of have got that sort of normality about them. He goes looking for his comedy and reactions from others. So he says the reason he's on Twitter, he says, because it's a great source of material. He said 90% of the stuff he writes is from some of the abuse he's got on Twitter. So does half the work for him.
That's definitely one way to get your material, isn't it?
Yeah.
But from your favourite comedy on to certainly one of mine, Teachers, debuted in 2001. And that was another comedy that wasn't sort of traditional in its sort of presentation. So as we said, a lot of sitcoms, you'll sit down and you'll watch it and it will have you kind of, you set laughter at particular points. Whereas Teachers was a comedy with a lot more subtlety to it.
Yeah.
I got into this at series 3, but went back and watched series 1 and 2, sort of retrospectively. What a funny show. It's absolutely brilliant. They do sort of have a bit of a revolving door of stars in the show. So you have Simon Casey, who's played by Andrew Lincoln, and I believe he's in series 1 and 2. But you have the whole thing of him coming back and sort of the reactions to that. And then there's people who've joined in the meantime who have no idea who he is and all this sort of thing. But there's so many subtle details in there. And it's just an amazing show.
Yeah, I did enjoy it when I watched it. It was one of the early TV appearances of James Corden. He's one of the kids.
Yes.
And Raquel Cassidy and Nina. I'm going to get her name wrong here. Nina Sosanya. They were both a couple of my favourites. I like them. Little link that we've just talked about The Office, and we've linked straight into Teachers, is Ricky Gervais's long-term girlfriend partner, Jane Fallon, exec produced it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm people who listen to past podcasts will know that I just sometimes just talk nonsense and have weird little things that no one else really needs to know. No one needs to know that, but I like them sort of little things.
Next one is a show that we both watched, but not a massive fan of. 2 pints of lager and a packet of crisps. It was fun, but it wasn't particularly memorable.
Yes, throwaway TV, isn't it? It's the sort of thing that, 2 pints is on, I'll watch that because there's nothing else on, and then you're halfway through the episode, you're talking about something else, and then you pop out and get a cup of tea without pressing pause, you come back and nothing's really happened.
Yeah, it's one of them where it ran for about 10 years or something, but it's one of them where you'll see odd bits of odd episodes and remember odd details about it, but everyone sort of went on to do other things that were much bigger and better, mostly. But yeah, it was definitely a strange choice for Ralph Little, I'd say, coming from the royal family into that. But yeah, it was a bit of a weird one. It's a funny show, but not one that's going to go down in sitcom history as this sort of amazing show that everybody remembers. And
I don't want to pigeonhole anyone, but I would probably guess at a very, if it's going to be anywhere in any top hundreds, it'll be voted for by students, I think.
Students of that era.
Yeah.
Also, there was Kumar's at number 42. That was sort of a weird sort of hybrid of sitcom and talk show that was neither. It was funny, but very much of its time, and I don't think very many people particularly remember it.
No.
It wasn't a massive highlight of any sort of retrospective. And also, on the same sort of subject, 2D TV. It was meant to be a sort of animated 21st century spitting image, meant to be being the operative words.
Yeah, I remember the adverts because I think they tried to sell it with Posh and Becks, didn't they? And they were their two big stars at the time. And I watched a couple of episodes, and it was woeful. I think that's a good word to describe it.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't the TV highlight of 2001. It had potential and all the ingredients were there, but it's the equivalent of, you know, you look at some kind of comedy that we had of years around that time, and it's like comparing something made on the Great British Bake Off to someone taking the ingredients and throwing them on the floor.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, 2001, not the greatest year for comedy, but it did give each of us one of our favourite shows. So, bit of a mixed bag, I'd say.
Yeah, we'll take that as a win.
Yeah. I'm going to consult the mystery year generator as it has made its way up to Manchester. I'm surprised couriers haven't broken it, but we can hope. If I don't package it up particularly well when I send it back down. And the mystery year generator, what are you going to give us this time? I will consult it, and it's going to tell me. Oh, definitely not going to pack it very well. It's asked for for next episode to do a review of the comedy of 2021. You've rigged this, haven't you?
No, it's not. It's not my. It's not going to be my favourite modern day comedy. I didn't think there was such a thing.
We're going to find out if 2021 gave us any good comedy. There was a new series of Ghosts.
Didn't one of these satellite channels just do some repeats of Benny Hill? I think we're clutching at straws here.
Yeah. So, everybody, tune in next episode to hear us have to find something good in 2021 that made us laugh. Yeah, that's going to be difficult. On to something that's much, much easier to talk about and find funny material in. This month's comedy legend. Now, as we've said, some comedians go looking for attention, Ricky Gervais being one of them. And some of them very, very much shy away and let their performances do the talking. And that's certainly the case for this month's comedy legend, as he's somebody who has always been very sort of publicity shy. Doing the research for this particular episode, I went looking for interviews with him. Didn't find very many. But this month's comedy legend is somebody who I've watched a lot of his shows over the years and really, really enjoyed them. And, well, what else can I say? Legend is certainly true for Nicholas Lyndhurst. So the first appearance that we saw of him was 19. He was a child actor, but he didn't do comedy particularly until 1978, where he played Ronnie Barker's character's son in Going Straight. So he played Raymond Fletcher, I believe the character was called, for 4 episodes. So, Going Straight. What do we remember of that one?
I never watched it first time round, but when UK Gold first came out in 1992, and it was a good channel, it was the precursor to all the BritBoxes, etc., because it showed all the classic stuff, and they showed Going Straight after they'd done The Porridge. So I watched it for the first time round, and Going Straight itself wasn't very good. It took Ronnie Barker out of the prison, where he bounced off all the other inmates and all the guards, and that was where the comedy was. When you gave him his own vehicle, it wasn't great. And the wife was in it, the son was in it, the daughter was in it. But they were just filling. It was just to try and give him that family environment, and it didn't really work.
Yeah, it definitely turned into a sort of fish out of water sort of comedy.
Mm.
And you could tell that Ronnie Barker was the big star because he got all the jokes, literally all the jokes.
Yeah.
And they put him in situations, and it was going from sort of him sort of bouncing off people, as you say, to not knowing what to do and him sort of floundering. And it was almost like they were trying to do almost sort of like the kind of cringe comedy that we talked about earlier. Where it's a whole thing of, oh, how's he going to deal with this? He's wisecracked his way through prison, but he's now got to sort of sort himself out and kind of almost kind of wisecrack his way through life. But it never quite worked. And unfortunately, the character of Raymond was only in 4 episodes and never really had a great deal to do or say because everything was geared towards the whole thing of it's basically porridge without the prison. So, of course, the main character gets all the jokes. But the same year, 1978 through to 1983, he played Adam Parkinson in Butterflies. So he went from having Ronnie Barker as his on-screen father to Jeffrey Palmer with Wendy Craig as his on-screen mum.
Yeah.
I thought this was a bit better, but there was a strange sort of situation where the sort of will they, won't they of the affair kind of takes over the whole show. And in light of any sort of real sort of plot on an individual episode level, it's just will they, won't they have an affair with a few laughs thrown in. Now, for anyone listening, Butterflies, you can actually watch the 1979 Christmas special on BritBox at the moment. It's recently been added. It's not the greatest, I'll be honest. But the one good thing from Nicholas Lyndhurst's point of view is that was the show that got him the part in Only Fools and Horses. So that is when things start to really sort of get really good for him. And the part of Rodney, it really sort of catapults him from just this guy who is sort of an ancillary character in shows where he's alongside people who are much more famous than him, to making him a main character who's central to plots and things like that. So instead of just being a kind of teenager that walks on, says something, goes away, he's really sort of front and center the whole episode.
Yeah.
And that sort of really sort of catapults him a lot sort of further into our sort of consciousness. And it's only sort of 5 years after Only Fools and Horses starts that he is in The Two of Us. The Two of Us, that was LWT, and he plays a character called Ashley Phillips, and it's a whole sort of, the whole premise is that they're a couple that are living together but aren't married yet, which was still a bit sort of...
It was still frowned upon, wasn't it, back then?
Yeah, it was a case of, there was a bit of a sort of generational divide, because, it had the sort of, the characters were playing the sort of the younger people that wouldn't find it necessarily a problem with it. But there was going to be sort of older people who didn't see it as sort of the norm just yet.
Yeah, and as my old late nana would say, they were living over the brush. Have you heard that saying? It was about a couple who together and married.
I think my nan used to say that.
Yeah, mine did. Oh, they're living over the brush over there, you know.
Yeah, it's definitely one that I've heard from the sort of couple of generations before mine. But yeah, it was well, the two of us. It was all right. It wasn't hilarious, but it's all right.
Also, Patrick Troughton's last TV work. Well, it wasn't his last TV work, but it was his last series work before he passed away.
Hmm. Bit of a note for anyone trying to track down episodes of the two of us. You can get series one, but anything beyond that, not a chance. And I think if it was going to be released, it would have been by now, as it's been over about 10 years since series one got released. There were plans to do like a big sort of set of everything. But I think Network, the company that releases a lot of these, sort of canned that idea. Then that went on till 1990. And it was 1990 that he moved on alongside still doing Only Fools. He did a show called The Piglet Files. That was LWT as well. And this was where he was a reluctant spy. So what happens is he gets hired by MI5 after being sacked from the university where he's a lecturer. And that was an interesting one. He plays a character called Peter Chapman in that one.
Yeah, I watched episode 1 yesterday as part of research for this, and it went on for 24 minutes. I mean, the good thing about it wasn't half an hour because it was on ITV and they put adverts in, so it reduces the time, thankfully, because there was not one iota of a smile, let alone any laughing. It was possibly one of the worst episodes of television I've ever watched.
I'm going to call that revenge. You had me watching Dream Stuffing for the 84 episode.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah. But I just want to do a little link again because I do like linking things. The Piglet Files and The Two of Us both had music composed by Rod Archant, who was the founder of the band The Zombies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Very sort of keyboardy, you can tell it's 80s stroke 90s because it's very keyboardy, and yeah. So that's a nice little fact if anybody wants some quiz questions. Take that one.
Take it, please. So the next show is one that is much closer in my affection, certainly. One of the first sitcoms I really got into. And that was a show called Goodnight Sweetheart. So this was started in 93. And this was a BBC sitcom which was running alongside Only Fools at the time. And the whole point of it was that Nicholas Lyndhurst was playing Gary Sparrow, who at the start is a TV repairman who finds a wormhole that takes him back to the Second World War. But as time progresses, he stops doing the TV repairs and opens a shop which sells sort of like Second World War antiques and things like that. So it runs for about 5 years in sort of episode terms. There's 6 series of it. And what happens is he ends up having a double life. So he has his life in the 1940s and he has his life in present day as is. And there's only one person that knows that he's actually time traveling, and that is his best friend, Ron Wheatcroft, who's played by Victor Maguire of Bread fame. And what happens is he ends up having his marriage in the present day, and his wife Yvonne, and he then gets married in the 1940s to his 1940s wife, Phoebe. And all kinds of bits and pieces happen. We even see in series 5 and 6, they actually become friends with Noel Coward. Because that's a thing that would regularly happen in the 1940s. But the interesting fact is that both Phoebe and Yvonne are played by different actresses sort of mid through the series run. So the end of series 3, Michelle Holmes is no longer playing Yvonne, and Dervla Kirwan is no longer playing Phoebe. Because this is about the time that Ballykiss Angel comes out, and Dervla Kirwan is this huge star because of it. And this little midweek evening sitcom isn't what she's going to be doing anymore. So they bring in Emma Amos to play Yvonne and Elizabeth Carling to play Phoebe. Both stayed on for the reboot episode quite a few years later. That was, I'm going to rack my brains as to when the reboot was.
2016. Yeah, 5 years ago.
Yes. And what they do for that is that time has progressed. So it's now it's now the present day, it's 2016. And what happens is he actually witnesses his own birth. And because he witnesses his own birth, that opens up him traveling to the future. And he ends up actually going back to where his former shop was, because the way they sort of handle the end of the series, and I can quite safely say this without any spoilers on the basis that the show ended quite a few years ago, is that he's treated by everybody else, apart from Yvonne and Ron, as having disappeared. So his shop ends up becoming a burger joint. And what happens is he ends up being brought into the future, and there's a whole thing of, oh my God, you're here, because he almost gets run over by Ron in his, I believe it's a taxi, isn't it? It's a few years since I've seen it, because obviously it's not available to get anywhere, this sort of one-off special. They didn't put it on the DVDs or anything. But I think Ron is driving a taxi. It's like an electric car that he's driving, and Gary's massively confused because he's never seen an electric car before, because obviously he's been living in the 1960s. And there's this whole sort of thing of, everything has changed, and he's brought face to face with his daughter. So it's an interesting sort of one-off, but it leaves on a sort of cliffhanger because they didn't know if they were going to get another series or not. So they put a lot of cliffhangers in. So if they got another series, they had a lot of loose ends to tie up. But unfortunately, that never happened.
I think they should have done over their choice of Porridge.
Yeah. There's actually quite an active Goodnight Sweetheart fan community on the internet, because of course there is. And there's quite a lot of debate as to what should have happened on the reboot, what the next series should have looked like, and things like that. And they bring up all sorts of questions like, should Gary do the whole double life thing again? Should Ron go back to the 1960s because he knows about the time travel because he goes back to the Second World War, not entirely successfully. He's not particularly popular when he gets there. He kind of makes a bit of a fool of himself. But also the whole thing of should Gary's daughter from the present day, Ellie, discover sort of going back in time, how would that work? And also, should his son from back in the 1960s, Michael, should he go back? Should he go into the future as well? And how is that sort of dealt with? But it was a really, really, really funny show. There was a lot of really good humor in it, and it definitely kind of showed that, you know, there's a lot of things that Nicholas Lyndhurst can do that don't just involve being Rodney.
Yeah.
I think it was a really good good show for him to be in, to kind of take away that almost typecasting that was going to be almost inevitable.
Yeah, I think it's my favourite Marks and Grand show. Definitely.
Yeah. It was really, really funny. Definitely one to check out, and it is quite easy to get hold of. But a word of warning, you can't get the one-off special anywhere. You can't download it anywhere. You can't buy it on DVD anywhere or anything like that. But everything else you can. But the next sitcom is a bit of a surprise package. And I say that because it's not a hugely well-known one. It came out in 2007 and had 3 series from the beginning of 2007 to the end of 2008. A show called After You've Gone. And this was really a sort of... This was very much in the same sort of vein as My Family, and had the same writer and creator, a gentleman called Fred Barron, who created My Family, the very funny, very famous BBC sitcom, same sort of era, and also a show that listeners of this podcast will have heard me mention before, an American show called Caroline in the City. So I had looked into this After You've Gone. I've watched the first series. Really, really good show. So the premise of it is that Nicholas Lyndhurst's character is a builder / handyman called Jimmy Venables. And he has divorced the mother of his children. And she has now gone off to Africa. She's a nurse, and she's working in some kind of relief effort for a disaster over in Africa. And she has gone over with a doctor played by Alexander Armstrong. So he's brought in to live in the house and look after the kids. A couple of teenage kids. But he has to do that alongside his mother-in-law, played by Celia Imrie, who is a very opinionated school teacher. And it's the kind of show where you'd usually expect the phrase "and hilarity" as used to be used somewhat liberally. It's a lot better than it sounds. Everybody in the show is very good at what they do. So you have, obviously, Nicholas Lyndhurst playing the divorced father, Celia Imrie playing the mother-in-law from hell very, very well. But even down to the fact that all the sort of ancillary characters, you've got his 2 children, his daughter's played by Danny Harmer, who was played Tracy Beaker in there was a series. I think it was a few series, maybe a film, various bits and pieces over the years, where she sort of kind of reprises the role each time. But she actually, I believe, runs a drama school these days. And his son is played by Ryan Sampson, who is in Plebs. And his on-screen girlfriend is played by Amanda Abingdon. She's one of those actresses where you'll recognize her, but you won't quite know where you recognize her from because she's been in all sorts of things.
Yeah, I remember years ago a Maltesers advert she'd done.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and again, a nice little link to the first program we discussed earlier, The Office. She used to be married to Martin Freeman.
Ah, okay. Yeah, it was about this sort of time that she was married to him.
She's quite prolific on Twitter at the moment. She's I follow her and she's quite good. I do like her.
Yeah, she's really funny in this actually. But she's one of those people where you'll recognize her from various things, but you won't actually know kind of who she is. You won't be able to say, "Oh, that's her." But if you sort of see her in various things, you're like, "Oh, that's Siobhan from After You've Gone." But yeah, very, very, very highly recommend that show.
I'd never heard of it. But again, for research, I got hold of the first episode and I watched that, and I really enjoyed it. And it's one that I will watch if I get hold of them. I'll watch the rest of them. It was superb, and the cast is great. Obviously Nicholas Lyndhurst, and we mentioned Amanda Abington, Celia Imrie. She's good friends with Victoria Wood, who we featured in our last episode.
Yeah,
she was in the stuff, and she's one of these actresses that's she never lets you down in her roles. The youngsters were great. You mentioned Danny Harmer. I never watched Plebs with Ryan Sampson, but I watched Brassic, and he's one of the characters in Brassic.
Oh, okay. I've seen bits of Brassic. Well, not seen masses of it.
He's in that, and he was in a couple of episodes of Doctor Who a few years ago as well. So yeah, it's definitely one that I will watch more because I enjoyed it, and I didn't know because I hadn't done too much. I didn't know it was written by the same guy as My Family, but when I watched it, I thought, oh, this is got a feel of My Family to it. So yeah, you can tell the writer, and it's definitely be returning to it.
And
again, Nicholas Lyndhurst doesn't play Rodney, which is great.
That's the thing. He plays these kind of. The one thing he does really well is playing people that are reluctant to kind of go into the spotlight and are kind of forced into it by particular situations. And he plays those kinds of roles really well.
Yeah.
And I think in Goodnight Sweetheart, the idea of Gary is that he doesn't want to do anything that's going to kind of put him in situations where he's kind of the center of attention and things. And in the later series, as Yvonne gets more successful, he becomes sort of more kind of shy and away from things. And that sort of influences what happens in the episodes, is his reluctance to kind of be out in the public, out in sort of.
I suppose in many ways it reflects his real life choices then, doesn't it? Because as you touched on at the start of this, you said he's a very shy person and doesn't like the limelight, and a lot of his characters are the same.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that a lot of the best sort of character portrayals are often by people sort of playing characters that are very sort of similar to themselves, in that, if you have somebody who's very sort of loud and kind of very much in your face, to have to play that kind of character. Somebody like Lee Francis doing Keith Lemon.
Yeah.
Lee Francis, he couldn't shy away if he wanted to. So he plays these kind of really sort of outrageous kind of characters. Whereas somebody like Nicholas Lyndhurst, he's very sort of quiet and thoughtful in real life. And you give him these sort of characters, and he can play the sort of reluctant hero almost, because that's him and that's his life. And that's where you can see he's really sort of grown into it, because Only Fools and Horses, Rodney's a lot quieter than Del, and it works. And roles that really seem sort of written for him kind of really capitalize on that. But in our next show that we feature from Nicholas Lyndhurst, he plays a bit of a different character. Because in Rock and Chips, the Only Fools and Horses spin-off, he plays somebody that's a little bit different to Rodney. A character called Freddie Robdell, who I believe is a slightly less likable character.
Yeah, Freddie the Frog. Yeah, Freddie Robdell.
And yeah, he's a bit of a he's a bit of one to be feared in Rock and Chips, isn't he?
Yeah, he actually plays the sort of hard man gangsterish type thing quite well. Actually, I thought he was the standout in that series, definitely.
Yeah, he starts off as a career thief, but it turns out that he's actually Rodney's father.
Yeah. I think we first actually saw his face in a photograph in one of the 3 comeback episodes, and it was a very poorly photoshopped Nicholas Lyndhurst onto this black and white photograph, and if my memory serves me right, well, yeah, one of the 3 comebacks we first saw his face, but he was talked about. I think it was The Frog's Legacy, wasn't it? It was a Christmas special when it first came out, and another little one of my little side wanders off is that some of that episode was filmed in Ipswich, which is just 12 miles away from my house.
Ah, okay.
You know, the classic scene where Rodney is the pallbearer who walks in front of the hearse and takes it down the wrong street. Yeah, that was filmed in Ipswich.
Ah, okay.
I do digress as normal, so apologies for that.
So that was Nicholas Lyndhurst. Unfortunately, recent events around the unfortunate passing of his son in real life has meant that he's been away from our screens for a little time. Hopefully, he will one day make a reappearance, but you know, his reluctance to kind of be in the spotlight sort of highlighted when, you know, there was a lot of sort of press attention around the passing of his son, and he asked for privacy at that time and hasn't been sort of heard from in public ever since. But as I've said in previous episodes, we don't use the term legend lightly. But if you were looking for a sort of reluctant legend, I think Nicholas Lyndhurst is a very good example.
Yeah, definitely.
In our next episode, we will have another comedy legend, and we will be covering a review of the year 2021 in comedy. So hopefully that episode will last longer than 2.5 minutes.
Yeah.
That will be live in January 2022, which sounds very weird saying it when it's only a handful of weeks away.
Yes, 6 weeks to on a month and a week. It's 25th today. We're recording on the 25th of November, so an actual month today is Christmas Day. Then the week after that is New Year's Day. Yeah, so it's just around the corner. 5 and a bit weeks.
5 and a month today. We'll be watching the Mrs. Brown's Boys Christmas special.
I won't be.
Yeah, we could do a whole episode on why Verzo doesn't like Mrs. Brown's Boys, I think.
and we could have a spin-off where you add Miranda to the mix, and I just wouldn't turn up.
Yeah, you just comically fall over on the way, wouldn't you?
Yeah. I have listened back to our previous episode, and I come across as quite miserable, but honestly, people, I'm not. I'm quite jovial at times. Just some of the comedy we cover is sending me on a downward spiral. So we'll try and find some really funny stuff to talk about, so you can see the funny side of me. I don't mean to be miserable.
Can I see the funny side?
Yeah, I don't think you can either.
I was going to say, it's all well and good telling everyone you about your jovial side. I haven't seen it yet.
Fair enough. Yeah. All right. Yeah. I've been lying, folks. I am really miserable.
Yeah, I think in future we might need to rename the podcast Andy and Verzo Wind Each Other Up. That might work.
Yeah.
But before we go, it just leaves me to say a massive, massive thank you to everyone that's been in touch, everyone that's been downloading the episodes. Our little podcast has been getting quite a lot of attention that we never, ever expected. And everyone that's been so kind with wonderful feedback and suggestions and downloads and recommendations to your friends. It's been absolutely astonishing. And as we've said, we're bringing you lots more interesting and funny content, or hopefully you'll find it funny, throughout 2022. So as our last episode of the year, it just remains for us to say thank you for listening, and we hope you have an absolutely wonderful Christmas, and may you have lots and lots of classic sitcoms to watch.
Yeah. Thanks all, and see you soon.